It's Tuesday, September 12th, 2023, Bridgewater Township Zoning Board of Adjustment. It's just after 7 p.m., 7:02. Both adequate and electronic notice of this meeting specifying the time, place, and manner in which such notice was provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-6. Specifically, on April 19th, 2023, proper notice was sent to the Courier News and the Star Ledger and filed with the clerk at the Township of Bridgewater and posted on the bulletin board at the municipal building. Please be aware of the Zoning Board of Adjustment policy for public hearings. No new applications will be heard after 9:30 p.m., and no new testimony will be taken after 10 p.m. All right, if you're able, please rise for the salute to the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Roger. If we can get a roll call vote, please. Roll call.
Mr. Booth?
Present?
Mr. Wiley?
Here.
Mr. Uspina? Ms. Levine?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Fresco?
Here.
Mr. Bongiorno?
Here.
Mr. Gajewski? Absent. Mr. Seacat? Absent. Mr. Lyle?
Here.
Mr. Castillo?
Here.
Mr. Kulak and Mr. Vestier will be, sorry, hold on. Speak now. Mr. Kulak will be voted in his place.
Thank you.
Fern? Here. Ms. Doyle? Here. Mr. Roller?
I'm here.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to open the meeting up to members of the public that would like to speak on any land use issue. All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the portion of the meeting, and I just want to make two very quick announcements. The first, I want to thank our own Suzanne Mader, who's sitting in the back room in the closet. She has spearheaded the project to basically bring our technology in this room to the 21st century. So we are streaming. We're going to be on YouTube. The best part of it all, if everyone talks into the microphone, you will be immortalized on the internet forever. So what that means, essentially, is that recording and going back and listening to things for people that work in the land use office to construct minutes will be much, much easier. And members of the public also that want to catch a meeting, they have a soccer game or they have dinner, they don't have to watch or log into Ring Central or Zoom. They could essentially go onto YouTube. They don't even need to log in, and they can watch one of our meetings. So I think it's a great advancement. I want to thank Suzanne. She's done a great job. And I want to thank the Township Council, especially Council President Kirsch and Councilman Ring for getting the funding. This room really had been in it for 25 years, hadn't had a single bit of technology upgrade. So knock on wood, everything works tonight, and we have a great meeting. And then Bruce Bongiorno, he was also a big part of getting us up to speed. He was our project manager working with the land use office and our applicants to kind of help them plug in and be able to present their documentation. So if we can't see anything tonight, it's Bruce's fault.
HDMI cable.
All right, perfect. And I think that's all I have. We're going to move on to minutes, and we've got a bunch. And I also want to thank Joanne, Roger, and Nancy in the land use office. They have worked tirelessly to get us caught up. Post-COVID, we had some people go on maternity leave. We just had trouble hiring people in this market, especially coming out of COVID. The land use office is fully staffed. They're cranking away, and dare I say, Vice Chair Wadelli, we're pretty much caught up, right?
As of our conversation earlier, we are caught up as long as we pass everything, we're good. And I do thank Joanne, Roger, Nancy, and everybody for getting us caught up because it makes life a little easier for us too.
So with that said,
Mr. Chairman, I have comments on these minutes, which are very minor, some spelling mistakes, those kind of things, which I will send those comments by email to Joanne so she can correct the minutes.
perfect. You also
And
are a
having
great
said
resource.
that, I'm going to approve all the minutes in one package, right?
I'd like to break them up into two, if we could do the
Okay.
December 7th, 2021, because we
Yes.
had so many members kind of
Yes.
roll over after COVID. Pardon, that's probably
Okay.
poor choice of words
That's,
there. We had
that's a
so many
very good
member
idea.
turnover.
Yes.
And so let's do that first, December 7th, 2021. I am eligible, Roger. I have Sweeney, Bongiorno, Widely, Fresco, myself, and Amin. And I would look to the board for any comments or changes. We know we have Mrs. Amin's
Yeah,
changes.
I would say that based on my comments here, looks like Gary Laspisa is shown as absent on page number 1, but he was actually present. Based on going through the whole minutes, I see, yeah, he is voting yes, and no one who's absent can vote yes. So every page that you see, Laspisa is voting yes, 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 and I'm saying, what's happening here? So actually, on first page, it should say Gary was present.
I agree, and my notes reflect that Mr. Laspiza was in attendance. And ironically, this December 7th meeting was the meeting that basically forced our township council to say, we have a problem with our microphones in this room. So it led to a
And
good
then the
result, which is the upgrade.
Second comment on that is that Mr. Robel is not listed in the roll call. He was present, he was absent, or, yeah, he was absent. So it should, his name should be added, because every single thing, it says absent, Mr. Fallon, Mr. Robel, Mr. Gaiski, right? So he was actually absent, so in the roll call, his name should be added.
Understood.
Then the whole minutes will line up properly.
Okay. Any other comments or changes?
Yeah, so basically, Mr. Min, so any changes you want, we'll approve them with the changes, because they're all just minor changes for the most part.
See, other than that, on the December 7th, I had no other comments.
Yeah, so we'll just make the changes and put them,
All right, can I get a motion, please, to approve?
I move.
All right, then Mr. Wiley, second? Second. That's Mr. Bongiorno.
Just want to reconfirm eligibility for vote. Mr. Booth, Mr. Wiley, Ms. Amin, Mr. Sweeney, Mr. Fresco, Mr. Bonjoro.
Good.
All right, I'll call the roll. Mr. Booth,
Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes.
Ms. Amin,
Yes?
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Fresco,
Yes.
Mr. Bonjoro.
Yes. All right, so next up, we're going to have a block of minutes, January 31st, 2023, February 7th, 2023, March 7th, 2023, March 21, 2023, April 18th, 2023. And Roger, I've given you what I think is a commonality amongst members that were here. Do you want to read them off?
Yes, eligible, Mr. Cruz, Ms. Amin, Mr. Sweeney, and Mr. Fresco.
Okay. And Mr. Widely.
You forgot me. I missed one meeting in 10 years.
So amongst those members, do I have comments or changes?
If Mrs. Min had any, we'd just put those through.
Okay. Could I get a motion to approve that block, please?
And I move the block.
Mr. Widely, second, please.
I'll second.
It was Mr. Fresco. Yes.
Mr. Wiley,
Yes,
Ms. Amin,
Yes?
it's the block of it.
Yes?
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Fresco.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move on to resolutions, which we have none. And we're going to hop into our applications. We're going to do a quick final site plan approval of the cottages at Martinsville LLC. Mr. Lair, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of your professional staff, members of the public. Jeff Lehrer on behalf of the law firm of DeFrancesco Bateman. Just to confirm jurisdiction, Mr. Oler, no public notice was not required for this.
Yes, let me just explain that to the board. So the municipal land use law does not require notice for a final approval unless the municipality has an ordinance that otherwise requires it. And Bridgewater does not have such an ordinance, so there's no notice required for the final.
Thank you, Mr. Oler. As you may recall, some of you, most of you were here
we received a preliminary major site plan approval for this project for 8 single-family cottage homes in a condominium arrangement. 1.87 acres of that property is devoted to open space with a clubhouse, a historical home that's going to be the old Yaley home, which is going to be converted and renovated to a community center and a clubhouse. There's walking trails, a gazebo, and a playground and patio. The homes will be restricted to people that are 62 years of age or older as the primary household, head of household, and no one in the home can be under 19 years of age. The property is Block 802, Lot 131, commonly known as 802 Chimney Rock Road. I can tell you that the governing body, the planning board recently approved the name of the roadway to Cottage Court. We received preliminary approval in June of 2022. As I stated, the 1788 old Yaley home will be restored. All homes will be on land units. The HOA documents have been approved by Alex Fisher from the Township Attorney's Office. All conditions of the preliminary approval have been complied with, and construction of the project has actually begun, some site work. We are merely seeking final site plan approval in order to start constructing the cottage homes. The joint report of the planner and engineer with respect to that report, it was dated September 6th. In terms of the floor area ratio, I can tell you that the record of the resolution at paragraph 23 of the findings of fact states that even if they put a second story on any of the homes, we would come under the floor area ratio. So if Mrs. Doyle just wanted me to put that on the record. In terms of condition number 2, a permit for site construction has been issued, and all conditions of preliminary approval have been satisfied. The HOA documents have been reviewed and approved by Mr. Fisher, and I have, just for the record, and I'll mark this as A1 just very quickly, is for all members of the board, is a copy of Alex Fisher's review letter approving all of the relevant compliance documents.
Explain to the board who Alex Fisher is.
I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm not sure everyone
Yeah,
else
sure.
knows.
The law firm, the township attorney is Savo Fisher. And so Alex Fisher does all the compliance reviews for the planning board and the zoning board on behalf of the township. And he makes sure that all the documents, easements, et cetera, HOA documents are in order. And he has reviewed all of the documents and given his blessing on all the documents. And I'm going to just hand this out. It's just for the record.
Yeah, we'll mark that A1 for the record.
Just included in that is a stormwater easement that was approved by Mr. Fisher, and the O&M, the operation and maintenance manual, is attached as an exhibit, which will be recorded prior to any building permits. Mrs. Doyle lastly, and Mr. Burr lastly, say that a compliance binder is required. Mrs. Doyle, I'm not sure one is. I think one was already done. But if not, one will be done.
I believe he is correct. It was done for preliminary.
Right.
And the difference between preliminary and final is, but I think you should make a determination and put it on the record how you feel. I don't think another compliance report is needed.
Okay, we're going to accept your recommendation there, so just no second binders required.
What I would say is they should file the simple variance, which is nothing, the simple compliance, which is nothing more than complying with conditions that they might have tonight and confirmation that there's adequate escrow.
Yes, no problem at all. And lastly, a developer's agreement was approved by Mr. Fisher, and that's reflected in the email as well. The fire marshal also issued a report dated August 18, 2023, and he had no objection to this project. That's really all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Burr, your name is on the memo too. Just want to make sure you're good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am good. I do just have one question. I don't know if Mr. Lair would be the one. to
Please, please.
Jeff, so for final approval, is the proposal in terms of the final build-out identical to what the board previously approved? under-
Identical,
No
yes.
changes?
No changes. There has been no change whatsoever. Good question, by the way. The HOA documents, it will be recorded before the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy. So they've been approved by Mr. Fisher, but they won't be recorded, and the condominium master deed that creates the land units, so it's a unique project, as you're aware, will not be recorded until the first CO. So that way, the taxing authority will be able to tax these as individual land units.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You got it, you got it. Any other board members,
Yeah, I
questions?
have a question for Mr. Lair. You brought up the area ratio if they put a second floor. We
Yes.
approved them with one floor, correct?
They were approved with one floor with the ability to put a second floor, and I'm going to just read you that section of the resolution.
Please.
Yeah, sure. Put my glasses on, Mr. Wiley. It's getting to that point. Mr. Folk has addressed, it's finding of fact number 23. Mr. Folk, that's George Folk, by the way, also addressed comments included in the December 16, 2021 report of the township engineer, as well as the February 22, 2022 report of the township planner. With regard to the report of the township engineer, Mr. Folk testified that he revised the plans to address those comments. As to the report of the township planner, Mr. Folk confirmed via photograph that a tree which Mrs. Doyle had suggested that the applicant tried to save was in fact an ash tree that had died. Mr. Falk also confirmed the floor area ratio, testifying that an FAR variance was not required as the permitted FAR was 0.12 and the proposed FAR was 0.1199. He explained that his calculation was conservative, stating that he utilized the floor area of the first floor of the clubhouse/community center and assumed first and second floors for all 8 cottages, as a second floor is an option for all of the homes.
All right. I'm good.
Any other board members, questions?
Yeah, I do. And Jim, that's great you picked up on that because that caught my attention as well. So what basically we're saying is they have the option to add a second floor as long as it doesn't exceed the floor area ratio.
Correct.
But to Mr. Burr's point, if nothing has changed, didn't we sign off on those or no?
The architectural plans that were presented identified that there may be, as an option, a second floor. I'm not saying they're all going to be. Some of them may be. It depends on the market. Remember, these are 62 years of age and older. A lot of people don't want to climb stairs or don't want to have to get to that point. I'm sorry to say that I'm getting to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking that, if we're going to move space, and then where's the limit? They put a bedroom up there, and then that could open up all kinds of other things. But I suppose-
It's masters down, which means masters on the first floor.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm going to open up members of the public. Questions on final site plan and Mr. Lair's testimony? All right, seeing none. Rich, what's our course of action here?
Mr. Chairman, the municipal land use law is pretty clear when it comes to final approvals for site plan, and provided that the final is the same as the preliminary, which is what we've heard from Mr. Lair, the municipal land use law indicates that the board shall approve the final. So, not optional.
With that said, in the shall, in the NOUL, can I get a motion to approve final
I move
site
we do
plan?
final.
Mr. Wiley, do I have a second, please? Second. That was Mr. Bongiorno. All right, Roger, we'll take a roll call vote, please. Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Lair.
Thank you,
Thank you.
members of the board.
All right, next up, we have Hamamatsu Corporation and some ground-mounted solar and site improvements,
Good evening. If you
Mr.
don't
Erd.
mind, can I move the microphone over to the other table?
wherever you're comfortable, as long as the microphone can hear you. And just,
Member of the public comes back up, I'll move
if
it
a member of the public does come up, you gotta throw the microphone back. Jurisdiction.
Yes, while they're doing that, Mr. Chairman, I can affirm with the board that the applicant has noticed all the homeowners property owners within 200 feet. The form of notice was proper, and they also published timely, so the board has jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aller. And thank you to the board, Mr. Chairman, everyone else, and the board's professionals, and any of the public that may be here that's not here for this on behalf of my client. My name is Chris Erd, E-R-D. I'm an attorney at Norris McLaughlin, right down the block here. And we're here for a preliminary and final site plan application with a use variance for Hamamatsu Corporation. And this is for a property that's located at 360 Foothill Road. The primary lot involved here is Lot 5. That's the only one that there's going to be construction on, but since there's common ownership with also lots 1, 2, 3, and 4, we noticed around all those lots, because it's kind of part of a complex. For those of you who may not know, Hamamatsu is an international corporation that specializes in the production of optical equipment and technology, and they have over 5,000 employees worldwide. They have approximately 150 here in Bridgewater, which is their U.S. headquarters. So they're here tonight for something that's relatively straightforward and simple, but does require a use variance according to the board's planner's interpretation, which we're not arguing with at all, for solar panels that are going to be placed on top of carports over existing parking lots at the site. There are already being constructed solar panels on the roof of the primary building. Those do not require site plan approval or variance because that is specifically permitted. Technically, there could be an argument that because we're putting on carports that are accessory uses and then putting these on the roof might not require a variance, but we didn't want to argue that point, which is why we're here before this board. So I plan on only having 2 witnesses this evening. We have our professional engineer, Craig Stiers, who I know has been here many times before, but we'll briefly go through his qualifications anyway. And we also have a planner who's also been here many times before, Christine Cafone, who will go through the proofs that we need for the use variance. And we'll also go through, probably primarily with Craig Stiers, the one really substantive report that we got, which is a joint report from the board's planner and engineer. We did get a very short memo from the fire department that we'll touch on as well, but those are the only 2 reports that I'm aware of that we received. If there's any others that I'm not aware of, I would ask that I be given those so we can make sure we address them, but I think that's all. So unless the board has any additional questions for me at this time, I'd just like to bring Mr. Stiers up so we can get started with his presentation.
Now, that sounds good. And while he's coming up, Mr. Erd, if you could just to remember that people are watching on the stream in this new world, we kind of have to, guide them through which document we're looking at, where in the document we are, just so people can follow along at home and know where you're talking.
Will do. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Stiers.
Before we do that, would you please stand, raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Would you state your full name, spell your last name for the record, please?
Craig Stiers, S-T-I-R-E-S. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stiers. I know you've been here many times before, but for the record, could you please give the board a brief outline of your qualifications as a professional engineer?
I'm a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I've testified before this board as well as both boards in Bridgewater as well as throughout central New Jersey. I said similar applications to this, residential, commercial, industrial site plans.
And your current license in New Jersey is active and in good standing?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd offer Mr. Stiers as a qualified, as an
See
expert.
you again, Mr. Stiers, and welcome back, and we accept you.
Same.
Okay. Craig, you filed some plans with the board that they all should have in their packets. So we're not going to go through each page of those, but I did see that you brought an exhibit that we need to go through and mark.
Would you just mark that as A1, today's date, and just describe what that is on the record?
Just grab the mic. I think if you just tilt it up toward yourself, they want to make sure they get it recorded for.
We might have a handheld for you.
Oh, there we go. Even better.
So you have to hold it really close.
Okay, the rendering that you see before you is actually a colored version of sheet 2 in the site plan package. So there's really no deviation from it other than the coloring itself.
Okay, so go ahead if you can just walk the board through what they're seeing on this application.
Okay. As Chris introduced, the site is for the Hamamatsu Corporation. And to orient you on the plan, you have Route 287 along the top of the plan here. You have Foothill Road coming along, winding along the bottom. This is the off-ramp coming off of Route 22, and then ultimately to Findern Avenue. Ronson Road, not sure how many people realize it's actually Ronson Road. And whether you realize it or not, that this is Hamamatsu Way, which is, the street sign is out there, so that's, I don't know if it's on the tax map or not, but the way it's labeled in the field. The access to the site is through Hamamatsu Roadway. I believe this is probably the former Foothill Road before they put 287 in, because it used to extend through the site. As Chris said, the site is lots 1 through 5. So essentially you have, not shown on the plan here, but 1 through 4 were in this location here. Lot 5 is the remainder where all the improvements are. So the driveway comes in, splits, and one driveway goes to a parking lot on the easterly side of the building, and there's another parking lot on the westerly side, and then a small lot or parking spaces in the front where the ADA parking is located. The site contains 7.79 acres and is located in the HIC, Highway Interchange Commercial Zone. Kind of going through that. And pretty much like I said, the existing conditions are the parking lots, the building. There is a detention basin in the southeast corner. There is another detention basin right above the intersection. So that's the existing conditions, and what the applicant is looking to do is to construct carports with solar panels over top of the existing parking in each of the lots. So you have a solar panel or carport with solar on top of the existing parking spaces. Same thing in this location along the northerly side of the parking lot. And then in the west lot, you would have an array on the west side and an array on the east side.
And just for clarification, this would be similar to what is at the high school parking lot and behind 400 Commons Way as well.
At the high school as well as the middle school. So very similar setup. The bottom of the arrays would be approximately 14 feet high. Kind of a trellis look, so it's actually almost exactly the same as the high school and the middle school, as well as your office as well. So obviously becoming very common. It's a little bit different, you know, if you look into the ordinance, and I'm sure Christine will kind of get into this a little bit. The ordinance talks about a ground-mounted array, and I think Chris kind of touched on it as well, it's a little bit different than although it does touch the ground, these are up on carports, and then the solar panels are above that. So it makes it a little bit unique. So.
And you're just distinguishing that from like a ground-mounted like solar field on a farm field that's not raised up above.
Right, which basically sit on the ground and they're about, 3 or 4 feet high and, hundreds of acres of them.
I think we had a question.
My own edification, this would be like what's at the Bridgewater Mall with the top parking
That is
lot?
There's
another
that too.
example. Yes, yep. Yeah, I mean, there's examples throughout the township. I think we kind of used the high school and the middle school, figuring everybody has been through there at some point or another.
And the difference at the mall is that's on top of a parking deck and these are on the ground, so.
One of the other things that, besides the solar panels themselves, if you come over the ramp here, if you look into the site, there's an opening right now where you can see into the parking lot. So we are landscaping this area to create a buffer from those solar panels themselves. We are not buffering the ones on the west side. As a direct line, these are approximately 180 feet back from the right-of-way. And obviously you can see as Foothill bends around, it actually gets further away from the solar panels themselves. So we felt that they set back enough that they did not need to be screened. And as you can see from this aerial, which is pretty self-explanatory, as far as the neighbors are concerned, you have none. You basically have the Red Lobster and the hotel, which fronts on Route 22. There's no residences. You have both lane, northbound, southbound, Route 287. You have both interchanges coming from Route 22 on the Route 287, and as well as the ramp coming off of Route 22 to Van Buren Avenue. So as far as buffering, the lot layouts, adjacent properties alone are pretty well buffering of the site. As far as an engineering standpoint, that's really the crux of the application on my end, if there's any. The other thing is that the stanchions for the carports will not change the configuration of the parking, so the striping will all stay the same. So again, there's no change in impervious coverage because they're both on impervious areas already. So unless I've missed something, like Chris said, it is a use variance because the HIZ zone is not an industrial zone, which is the only place that the solar panels are permitted use, and another reason that we are here before you tonight.
Thanks.
I just have a quick question for you. You had mentioned that there are similar examples at the middle school, the high school, and the mall, but you're not suggesting that you're going to build them identical to those exemplars that you used. You're just saying they kind of look like that, am I right?
They look very similar to it. I think if you look at, especially if you looked out the doorway itself, you'll see underneath the solar panels themselves, it's kind of a trellis look to it. Mm-hmm. And then you have the stanchions come down. So it's not identical, no, but very, very similar, yes.
Just want to make sure you're not locking yourself into an exemplar of something you mentioned, and then you have to duplicate it.
Well, there are examples on the plans of
Yes,
actually.
we have cross sections on the plans themselves, yes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so if there are any more general questions, we do have the two reports that we could go run through with Mr.
Let me just ask one other question. You want to go?
Go ahead.
It talks about how the water just runs off these things onto the parking lot. So there's no routing, there's no gutters or anything. It's just literally running right off.
Right.
That's
And then
normal.
as far as snow is concerned, they do have for lack of a term, it's almost like on a roof where it has kind of that racking that holds the snow in place until so it's not going to, ice and snow are not going to fall off of the panels.
Right.
So-
I'm just surprised that, like, at this point, we're not routing water, you know, down into, you know, a drainage or something. It's just running off.
Well, in this case, there is existing parking lot with existing drainage. Perhaps if that weren't the case, that it needed new drainage, that would be the case.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you can almost make the argument, do you want to concentrate it or do you want to have it kind of sheet flow? So you can go both ways as well with I mean, I understand the question, but you could go both ways with that question.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Are you gonna, is there gonna be batteries involved, or is it just during the daytime, use the sun, get the electricity, and that's the end?
That's my understanding, yes. And
No batteries.
Even the inverters, they're very small and they're up high on the columns.
Uh-huh.
So there's not a large inverter that's going to convert. It's up part of the carport itself.
Ancillary question, is there any charging stations on the site?
I believe they're going to put one in, yes, in the upper corner here.
are you talking about for electric vehicle charging?
Yeah.
An EV spot, yes.
Thank you.
Craig, given that buffering is required for ground-mounted solar panels, and you've mentioned a small bit of buffering that you're planning to either improve or add, can you show us what these things are going to look like to people driving by the Hamamatsu building?
We did put together I guess you can call it a simulation, and it's without the buffer. So, I mean, I could pass that out to kind of give you an idea.
Without the buffer, just to the east there.
Right. I also have, so the other thing is, what Hamamatsu did a couple years ago was to make some site improvements. So they paved a lot, they restriped a lot, and they wanted to give a greater presence as you came around. So actually, they did remove some of this landscaping. So I actually have a street view with the landscaping there, and when it's not there. So it's like you're going to see, and a condition that existed is what we're proposing to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I understand. I'm just curious about what these arrays, these ground-mounted arrays are going to look like as you're traveling on Foothill Road.
So as you come around this location right here,
Well, yeah, basically I think that's my primary point of concern, since that's where there's no buffer right now.
right, and because of the proximity of the vehicles and the buffering, you probably will most likely not see the panels at all, because the buffering is going to get up to a certain point here, and you would actually be looking straight over the top of them.
Probably most likely. Does that mean they won't see it, or?
Well, I think it would be best if I passed out the,
I think what he's talking about is when the landscaping that's proposed has grown in fully, then you won't see anything. Right? You know, at first, the plants are immature, and then you won't be able to see anything.
These all the same?
You know, I think we should mark that.
Mark it, and if you could, because you have the arrays marked on the plans. 1 and 2 I have to the east, and 3 and 4 to the west.
yeah,
These are arrays,
1 and 2.
gotcha.
All right, so we're marking.
For the record, we're going to mark this exhibit as A2, today's date. And again, Mr. Stiers, would you just describe for the record what A2 is?
So the upper one is, it's a photograph, a street view photograph from this location right here. So it's looking into the easterly parking lot from the Foothill Road ramp. And as you can see, there's no landscaping in that area. So that is a more current view than the view below that. So the view below that is actually, I believe, from 2019 in approximately the same location. So as you can see, with the landscaping in place, the buffering, you most likely will not see those panels based on that perspective that you're looking at. On the west side, Chairman, 3 and 4, as you would call it, yes, you will see them, but again, they're set back 180 feet there's a large tree in this location, there's another large tree in this location. So yes, you will see them, but the perspective is much further back.
Those trees are going to stay?
Oh, yeah, yes.
Is the orientation of the panels such that they'd be reflecting into the eyes of the drivers going by until such time as the proposed landscaping grows?
No,
So the orientation is to the south and east, and it's fixed, am I correct or not?
yes,
Okay. And as I'm driving by, that won't create any kind of glare for the drivers?
no.
I have a question regarding what is the total kilowatt rating of the arrays? Will you be able to answer, or someone else will?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The electrical kW kilowatt rating of all the 4 arrays.
I do not know that specifically. I mean, we could check, there are representatives.
Someone else can answer, okay.
I have a question on the coverage of the solar panels. The professional's letter here identifies that the solar panels would cover existing grass areas and sidewalk pavements. I don't know if you can clarify that or kind of...
Just for the record, can I just say, are we referring to the memorandum dated September 5th, 2023? That was the joint memo from the engineer and planner?
September 6th.
Oh, September 6th. What did I say?
That is correct.
Thank you.
All of the panels on the easterly side, 1 and 2, are in the parking lot itself, so there's nothing underneath them. The panels on the west side, 3 and 4, will overhang on the grassed areas, but again, they're up 14 feet up in the air, so it really is not covering the grass. And then also, solar panels are not considered impervious. So the only thing that theoretically is impervious would be the columns coming down, and they are in the parking areas.
Okay, great, thank you. And one more question. I see you have a letter from the fire marshal here. Just confirm that there was no issues with vertical clearance for fire department trucks getting into the site with the...
Bottom clearance is 40
Yes.
feet.
And that...
Just for the record and those watching, that's the August 25th, 2023 memo from the fire marshal.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks. So since we've already addressed the fire marshal memo, which states no objections, the only issues that we needed to go through were in the September 6, 23 joint memo from the board's planner and engineer. There's a few things listed on here, some we've already touched on, but Mr. Stiers can go through them quickly as to whether we'll just comply or if there's any discussion or questions that need to be addressed for any particular items.
No, I think a lot of these pertain to the setbacks, so it'd be the planning testimony. So I would say that we will comply with any of the comments that are necessary, required for the approval.
Just to restate there, anything that you don't bring up, we're going to assume that you're going to accept.
Correct.
this memo.
That's all. Will comply with all the engineering comments and requests set forth in this memo. There is one thing that I think we need to discuss a little bit, Craig, was item number 15, the decommissioning plan. This one's a little bit unique because this is one of those things that is a little bit of a square peg in a round hole, because this is really designed for those solar field type of applications, and this is a carport. So I'll let Mr. Stiers elaborate, but the carport is intended to remain there perpetually. So are the solar panels, frankly, but Mr.
Yeah, I
Stiers.
mean, even if, for example, they took the solar panels out, the carports would remain and, serve as a carport for the parking areas. They intend to have these solar panels there perpetually, and if there's a problem with them, they would repair them and replace them accordingly. So, and then Chris kind of alluded to, again, we go back to a ground mount where it's they're literally on the ground. They're 2 to 3 feet high. They're on 5 to 10. I mean, we did one in Branchburg that's on 40 acres. That makes complete sense, because if you stop them and all of a sudden you have an open field where all the solar panels are, it makes sense to have a decommissioning plan, and Chris was very thorough to make sure we got it.
Yeah, I was the chair of the board at the time there.
Okay, so So back to that, Mr. Stiers, on this equipment, is it considered modular? So, I know solar panels, I went through this on my house recently. They were quoted as a 25-year life, and I think they were 400 kW per module unit with inverters built in. So this is similar to the kind of, I want to make sure that the whole facility doesn't need to come down if there's repairs. So they can go up and they can.
Right, that's the thing is, and I think that's kind of what Chris and I are, so you have a carport.
Right.
And then the solar panels, the 2x4 panels are placed on top of that. So it's not one big solar panel. They are, 2x4 units that are, once the carport is up, then they are placed on top of that.
And it's modular, so they would be able to swap out a bad inverter or a bad cell and pop it in, and they wouldn't have to go and tear down any of the structural components of it.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So, Mr. Erd, so back to 15, how do you want to handle this?
So 15, we're really asking for a waiver of that condition of a decommissioning plan, of a formal decommissioning plan, because like we were talking about, this really is, it could, if we come in for an accessory carport, we wouldn't be here. It's because of the solar panels on it. And even if the solar panels someday, for some reason, were removed, the carport would still remain. So in this case, I don't think a decommissioning plan is really necessary.
And there's no other boxes or sheds or equipment that's needed to get this power onto the grid or on a transmission line that needs to be
Again,
added?
With the carport, the inverters are up on so the collection and again, it makes it unique where a larger system would come down, come to what would look like a transformer or inverter box, and then in. This is all up on the carport, and then it's wired underground directly to the building.
Did Hamamatsu have to go to PSE&G or PJM Interconnect to get approval for this project from a capacity standpoint, or is it still underneath the threshold?
I don't know about that.
Yeah. We do have a representative here from the company that's going to install this equipment. So if you had specific questions that you
I
wanted to
just want to make sure that there's no mission creep here, that ultimately that PSE&G or First Energy, whoever's the serving entity, comes back and says, well, this is bigger than what we anticipated, and we need to put in a half-an-acre box to get this onto the transmission grid, because some of the ground-mounted larger facilities like we see in other towns, they do need transmission equipment, and they do need to apply to the ISO.
Well, I think a way to deal with that is if for some reason that did happen, we'd have to come back to the board for an amended approval.
And again, this doesn't go out to the grid, it's going to the building.
It's going to serve the building, but ultimately, any excess, it's going to end up on the PJM grid, the local distribution grid.
And how does that happen? I mean,
I don't think that's the way it's going to happen.
I'm a little
I can speak
confused.
to that, but I don't think that's permitted to do, like you said, without approval from PSE&G, so.
This process is not going to feed the grid, and then you're just going to draw from the grid. It's going to go directly to the facility.
That is the intent. Now, we are getting into areas that neither myself nor Mr. Stiers is really the expert in. We have a representative from the installer here who could speak more
That would
directly.
be great to hear his comments on that.
All right, so
We'll bring them up next.
we'll leave 15 as an open item. Let's get more questions from the board and from our professionals, and then we'll open it to members of the public, and then we'll hit your next witness. All right, Scarlett or Bill, any questions?
And before we do that, I should swear both of you in as well. If you raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And just state your names for the record, please.
The purpose of 15 was to avoid the potential in the future that you have these skeletons with disassembled, half disassembled solar panels and unsightly. And of course, in this case, I'm not awfully concerned, but I think it would not be unwise to say that the solar panels shall be maintained in good and operable condition. And if that is not to be the case, they should come back to the board to discuss a decommissioning.
I think that's fine, and that could be addressed with a note on the plan simply at this point, if that would be okay, acceptable.
Stipulate to that?
Sure.
Great. How about you, Mr. Burr?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple of questions for Craig. You testified, Craig, the bottom of the carport/arrays is 14 feet.
Yes,
It's clear for fire trucks, and I think our fire marshal
yes.
weighed in on that. How tall are they, though, at the highest point, on average?
I would say definitely less than 20. You know, I'd have to go into the geometry of a 30-degree angle. So I would say it's probably at the high end, maybe another 3 feet or so. So between 17 and 20 feet tops.
And that's something that we may be able to further clarify with Mr. Axel, who will come up.
And you had testified that the carport installation, the 4 areas, will have no impact on the existing parking alignment or parking count,
Correct.
and no impact on the existing ADA parking, I think.
Correct. That's the ADA parking is that small little right in front of the parking lot. So there are no ADA parking spaces underneath the panels themselves.
Okay. I want to ask you a question, piggybacking off of Mr. Fresco's question about drainage. So you had testified, I guess there's 2 existing detention basins on the property.
Yes.
Correct? There's one on the easterly side, which, am I correct that that accepts runoff from that easterly parking lot?
Yes.
And same, there's one on the west side of the property, which, again, does that accept runoff from the western
Yeah.
parking
It
lot?
looks like from the remainder, yes.
And where these arrays are being placed, recognizing that you're not increasing the coverage overall, but is it in any way changing the direction that the runoff off of these panels is being directed?
No.
So the runoff will still come off the panels onto the parking lot, be captured in the parking lot drainage,
Yes.
and then be transferred to the existing on-site detention basins,
Correct.
correct?
Yes.
And you may or may not have looked at this, but did you investigate the condition of those basins? Are they in good repair in their current?
I did stop at the site probably a week or two, and the site is well maintained, so I would say yes, they're in good condition.
Okay.
I mean, the property was built in the mid-'70s, and I would say, I mean, like I said, they just resurfaced the parking lot, restriped it, so recent upgrades within the last year and a half, so.
And I was going to ask about that too. So the existing parking lot is in good condition, striping is in good condition.
Yes.
So these can literally be assembled right on top of what's there now.
Yes.
Okay. And do you know, would your client be amenable to a condition that, you know, you'll take a look at the basins and clean them out as necessary to make sure they're functioning properly?
Yes.
Not doubting that they're not, but just to make sure. Okay. Let me ask you about lighting. I didn't hear any testimony about lighting. Undermount lights being proposed?
Yes,
The exterior
we have a
lighting?
lighting plan as part of the plans. As you can see, they are mounted on centrally of the carports, and they are directed directly down. So,
So they're undermount, directed down, they're not going to
Correct.
cast any lighting off to the side?
Correct.
Impact any of the vehicular traffic?
correct,
traveling
correct.
Down the property? Okay. Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burr. Members of the public, questions on Mr. Steyer's testimony? All right, seeing none.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stiers. Stick by in case we need you back again. My next witness at this point, instead of Christine, our planner, will be Mark Axe, who's here from Seabright Solar. They're the company that has been contracted to construct/install this project. So he can answer some of those few questions that Mr. Stiers was unable to, or any others that you may have.
Please stand, raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Could you state your name, spell your last name, please?
My name is Mark Axe, A-X.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
I have a question. What is the name of your company?
That's thank you. I was just gonna lead into that, but go right ahead. The name of your company and your title and what you do with them.
Seabright Solar. I'm the Director of Operations, and I'm also the lead project manager for commercial.
And your company does what specifically?
We are a solar panel installer, so we do turnkey residential and commercial installations.
Thank you.
They've been around since, for 20 years.
Okay, so you were here and you heard the questions that were asked before about the kilowatts, the highest point of the carport arrays, and a few other questions. So if you could try and address those the best you can, if you can recall them.
First, to address one of the questions, PSE&G has already completely approved this system. So we're approved to interconnect directly to the building,
The microphone,
and it's
please.
approved as part of their grid. So this is a 436 kW system. The roof, which we are about to install, we were approved by Bridgewater for that not long ago, is 137. So the two systems combined offset 92% of Hamamatsu's energy usage. So we really need the carport because without it, only 20% is offset. So that's one of the reasons why we want this dual use.
It was 463 kW?
It's 436 kW.
All right.
And that's
Just for the carport.
And then there's an additional 137 that's already being put on the rooftop of the existing building, correct?
Correct.
And there was a question before about batteries, so this is all intended for, you said 92% of Hamamatsu's needs, so it's intended to be used on site, but there is an interconnect for overage, correct?
Yeah, this is standard net metering. So just like with your house, the grid is used as the battery for the energy. So when the energy is created by the panels and then converted by the inverters, it goes into the grid. It powers the building first, and then anything excess spins the meter backwards and is supplied to the surroundings, which is then utilized by the building at night. So that's why it goes back and forth with the meter, just like a house would.
I'm sorry, could you just say that one more time, please?
Sure. So just like I believe you had solar on your house. So it's called net metering, which means that the meter spins forwards and backwards. So during the day when the solar is producing, it supplies energy to the building first, and then if there is excess energy, it goes backwards through the meter, spinning it the other direction, counting down, basically.
So it moves back to the PSE&G.
Yeah, exactly, moving out to the surrounding area through the grid, and then to be utilized as a form of credit on the customer's bill.
So when the sun goes down, there's no power?
Yeah, when the sun goes down, it shuts off and goes to sleep basically until the morning.
Has there ever been any fire issues or problems like that?
No, there are no. These panels are all they're DC panels, and there's no problems with fire because there's also no buildings underneath as well. It's all steel structure, but they're panels that have been used for many, many years with no issues with this kind of problem, with this kind of system.
25-year lifetime?
Say again, sorry?
20 to 25-year lifespan?
What's the lifespan on the panels?
Oh, they are they're warranted for 25 years, but they last far in excess of 25 years.
And the degradation over time per year is less than 1%?
Yeah, it's 0.25%.
I'm sorry?
0.25%.
0.25. Thank you.
And are you responsible for the installation of the panels on top of what you're describing as carports, or are you responsible for the installation of the carports and the solar panels on top of them?
Yeah, we're responsible for both systems.
And the carports themselves, how are they affixed or secured to the parking lot?
Yeah, they are built out of,
That's also
foundations that go into the ground quite deep with large concrete cages as well. So just like any other large steel structure.
So those supports that you describe that require that additional foundation, that's not for each car that's there, it's for the entire structure? Or how would you describe that?
Oh, so each column is supported by its steel foundation and cages, and then there is an overstructure of beams and purlins which hold up the carport.
Mhm.
The panels are attached to the top.
Right. So structurally, how many of those columns do you need to cover the existing parking that was described earlier?
If you know, I believe that's shown on the plans, the specific number of columns, but if we need to, we could have Mr. Stiers count them on his plans. And
There's usually a column between every, I think, 3 parking spaces.
Thank you. That's good enough.
Will you be able to answer my question that I had earlier? What is the total kilowatt rating of all the panels combined?
The focus of the panels?
the total
You
kilowatt
know-
rating?
Oh, the total kilowatt between
Total
all of
kilowatt.
them? I think it's 500 and,
Well, you said there was 436 on the carport.
yeah, 436.92 technically, and 137,280. So it's 436 plus 137.
But remember, there's 2 parts here, so I don't want to be distinct.
Oh,
The carport is
436 is the
436.
total of all of the carports.
You know, how much power will be coming from the solar system to power the building, right? That's what I'm asking. Is it a 60% of the total capacity of the power supply, or what is the rating?
Of the Hamamatsu. I believe he testified that it was 92%.
92%, the combined, the roof and all of the carports combined offset 92% of the customer's energy. So they utilize about 710,000 kilowatt hours a year. And these carports will produce 93% of that, if that answers your question.
I'm going to say something. I have solar system in my house, right?
Okay.
And what happens is that it has a certain capacity. When it's generating more power, then it sends back into the utility system. So my question here is that when they did the calculation for my own house, they had it almost very close to the capacity of how much we take. Now, something similar should have been done to calculate the 4 arrays that you have, total capacity in kilowatts, how much is the total capacity in kilowatts, and what is the demand for the building. You know,
But I believe he testified that it's 92% of.
is he the person to answer, or is someone else going to be answering that question?
I didn't hear the last part of it, but I understand.
Can you answer the question of what percentage of the energy that's needed by this building is going to be produced by the solar panels?
The offset percentage.
What is the percentage of the full load?
By,
I believe you said 92% before. Is that
yeah,
the amount?
93 actually percent is what it presents, but I'm not understanding what you.
You are the installer, right?
Oh, I mean, if they're utilizing 710,000,
Well, you have 4 arrays, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? What is the kilowatt capacity of each array that you have?
total kilowatt capacity, the carport is 436. Is that what you're asking? I'm not,
Kilowatts?
kilowatts, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to know what the kilowatt hours it
No,
produces?
just kilowatts, just kilowatts.
Okay.
Just the kilowatts.
Well, yeah, kilowatts, as I said in the beginning. So the carport is 436.92 kilowatts.
Okay.
So which is 1,740 panels.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
The switch that's going to allow you to draw from either the panels or the grid, where is that located?
Where is their meter located?
No, where's the switch that allows you to draw from?
There isn't a transfer switch. It's not a like a backup generator. So the power is always feeding through there is a disconnect, so you can turn it off, which is located on the building, and there's also one in their main electric room. But it's not a transfer switch like where you need to shut off the grid to turn on, to just utilize the solar. It's always feeding through the building into the grid.
So in the event of a power outage with PSE&G or JCP&L, would your system shut down in that case, or would it still be feeding the grid?
Or if PSE&G needs to shut it down?
If there's a power outage in the area,
Power outage, everything goes off, including the solar. The solar actually needs the grid to run because it synchronizes with the grid. If it senses that the grid is down, everything turns off.
okay, so it won't be backfeeding in that case. Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions from the board for Mr. X? Board professionals?
Yes. Not to belabor the issue of capacity, is it true that anybody who wants to get solar has to get an approval, but you can't get approval more than 110% of what you use in a year?
Correct.
So-
The utility won't let you get approval for a larger, which is why this system is sized the way it is.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. The next question is something you're a recipient of some complaints that we had for years at the YMCA facility, similar to what you've got, except you have an advantage, and that is, if you take a look at sheet 4 of your plans, you show that the orientation is the high side is against Route 287, and the low side is against the Foothill Road. You agree with that?
So you're saying the high side is against, I mean, in both of the arrays, so these are all the high sides.
Yep. No, I mean
We're facing over here, and-
of each array.
Yeah.
The angle is such.
Yeah, it's a very slight angle. I think it's 5 degrees.
What happened, I guess I'm testifying a bit now. What happened with the the YMCA property, getting all confused with these letters, is that the high side was being viewed by the condos in the back. They could see the lights. Now, the same thing was told at the site plan. We have lights and they focus down. But you'll notice in sheet 4, in sheet 6, that the detail shows that the lens does drop below the housing, the light housing. So they are going to see some bleeding of the light from that small area that is, where the lens is dropped. However, because the angle is such, the people that would see it would be anyone at that elevation on Route 287, not on the other side, which is good, but which makes them kind of free and out of the woods, except I would like you to agree to the fact that if there is a location where the light is viewed by the township engineer as a nuisance, that you would fix that light and shield it such that it would be, so the nuisance would be cured.
Yeah, I believe the canopy itself will mainly shield the light because the canopies are quite wide. So even if it's in the middle, and all of these are tilted this way, so nothing can be seen to the back. These are tilted this way, so there's nothing that could be seen. This is the only section, but there's trees all in this area.
But you would agree to that condition,
Oh,
albeit
absolutely. If we
probably
needed
never
to
come
shield
up?
it, my experience of putting these up is that there's very little bleed and you cannot see into the light fixtures at all. But certainly, we would be able to shield it and make it.
Thank you very much.
Good idea. Thank you, Scarlett. Members of the public, questions for Mr. X? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Very much.
Just in case we need you, just stick right back there. All right, so I have one more witness. That is our professional planner, who is coming up right now. Thank you, Christine. Before you sit down.
solemnly swear that the testimony you will give to this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you can
Yes, I do.
state your full name, spell your last name.
Christine A. Nazzaro, Nazzaro, Cofone, C-O, F as in Frank, O-N-E. Business address is 125 Half Mile Road, Suite 200, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701. I'm testifying this evening as a licensed professional planner, which I've been testifying as in the state of New Jersey for about 28 years now. I've been qualified here in Bridgewater and about 450 other planning and zoning boards throughout the state of New Jersey. My licenses are current and valid and all paid for and current. And I teach planning and zoning courses for the Rutgers Center for Government Services, and I also serve as an affordable housing special master.
Thank you. I offer Ms. Cofone as a professional planner in the state of New Jersey as an expert.
Accept her, and it's good to see you again, Mrs.
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to be seen. This is a very straightforward application from a planning point of view. Ms. Doyle and Mr. Burr have teed up the proofs quite nicely in their September 6th, 2023 review. The reason we are here before the board is because while we are in the HIC zone, which does allow rooftop solar, and it does not allow ground-mounted solar. So to the extent that you interpret this as ground-mounted, even though we are on the canopy structures over the parking deck or the parking areas, that is the need for the relief. So as Ms. Doyle points out in the review, we are here for a use variance for an inherently beneficial use. That, as this board well knows, is a distinction with a difference, because as an inherently beneficial use, that means the planner has to go through the SECA balancing test and not the Medici proofs for the reconciliation, for the enhanced reconciliation. The SECA balancing test is a four-pronged test that the first prong in that test is to identify the public interest at stake. So here, renewable energy sources have been deemed to be an inherently beneficial use by the New Jersey court systems. You just heard Mr. Axe testify that we will be providing approximately 93% of the demand coming off of this site with the combination of the proposed roof and ground-mounted solar array. Purpose N of the municipal land use law encourages providing for renewable energy sources. So it is, without a doubt, an inherently beneficial use. The second prong in the SECA balancing test, and Ms. Doyle outlines this on page 3 of her professional review if you want to follow along with that test, is to identify any detrimental impacts that could result from the grant of the variance, and then the third prong would be to consider any reasonable conditions. So I've been keeping track, listening to the testimony this evening, as to some of the reasonable conditions that I heard that I think the board could consider to satisfy that prong of the test. And one is to ensure that the orientation of the panels do not create any glare. The second would be to maintain the existing vegetation on site, which will provide buffering. 3 is for the no increase in additional impervious coverage. 4 would be to maintain the current ADA and parking on site, the parking ratios, and not impact any of that with the solar arrays. 5 would be to clean out the existing basins on the property. And 7 would be, or 6, I'm sorry, would be to, in the event there was lighting, to work with the board's professional planner and engineer to make sure that there was no lighting spillover that was causing a negative impact, such was the case at the Bridgewater YMCA. So,
if I could just, I think there's one sort of a related condition that wasn't just maintain the vegetation, but to add vegetation.
yes, to maintain and add as proposed on the plans. So in addition to the use variance, we are seeking bulk variance relief to the extent they're not subsumed into the D variance. We do need variances for the setback of those and the buffering. I think in his explanation of the site plan, Mr. Sires explained quite well how on the eastern side of the site, we have the bend in the road and the geometry of the road, the existing vegetation there, and the proximity of the off-ramp to 22, sort of that bend, which is going to serve as a natural buffer of that. On the eastern side, or the western side, strike that, we have a substantial setback of almost 180 feet. So in either case, east and west installations will both either be located far enough from the roadway or buffered through the existing geometry of the road, and we are proposing some additional plantings to screen where appropriate. So that's essentially the relief that's being requested in conjunction with this application. So I think with respect to the SEQA balancing test, the last prong of that is for you to weigh, right? You identify the public interest, you identify any detrimental effects, you look at any reasonable conditions that can be imposed, and then the fourth thing is what we do all the time as planners, right? We balance that. We balance the positive and the negative and hopefully come to a conclusion that you believe this application has met its burden of proof. The last thing I'll add in the balancing act is that when I had an opportunity to review the master plan here, one of the things that's in the reexamination report was to the ongoing concern and the desire to preserve both the residential and corporate character of the township. And with that, there was an objective of keeping in touch with changing circumstances is necessary in order to strengthen the identity of Bridgewater through its residential neighborhoods and promotion of its robust commercial sector. So certainly having the combination of the roof-mounted and ground-mounted solar array is something to keep up with changing circumstances and providing for renewable energy sources, which have been deemed an inherently beneficial use by the New Jersey courts. The last thing I would say is that in your planner's review, she asked us to provide testimony on section 126-335-6, which comes right out of the renewable energy facilities section of your ordinance. And in that ordinance is about that section 126-335-6 is about 10 conditions A through J, and I'm happy to report to the board that we will satisfy all of those conditions. And they generally deal with building code issues and outside agency approvals and other statutory things, but I can tell you that from discussions with my client and in discussing this in our prep meetings that we've had to come as a team to come to this meeting tonight, that my client has indicated that we will in fact comply with the entirety of that section, and Ms. Doyle did ask us to provide some testimony on that, so I wanted to address that for the record. So with that being said, I think the board can certainly grant the variance relief. I think we have outlined a number of reasonable conditions and that we meet our statutory burden of proof for the grant of the D variance for this use.
If I could just ask you to clarify on one point that we left off before, that item 15 with the decommissioning plan. Do you think that that is necessary, that that's a reasonable request for a variance or waiver from that condition?
I do think it's a reasonable request. I do think that, that was one other condition Mrs. Doyle asked for, was that we maintain the facility, I believe was in good working order. So if we want to add that to our list of conditions of approval, or conditions if the board were to move, I apologize, Ms. Doyle did specifically indicate that she felt that that should be a condition of approval. I would agree with her that I think that that's an appropriate condition to impose on this application. And then with that, I don't see the need to have a separate decommissioning. You're welcome.
I have one quick question on the inherently beneficial use. Who came up with that? Who said that solar, I bequeath thee, is now inherently beneficial? Where did that come from?
That renewable energy sources are inherently beneficial?
Yeah.
Chair, I'm not exactly sure the name of the case that came out of that, but I'll have my office send it to you tomorrow.
It's actually statutory now.
Yeah.
It was originally case law, but then they codified it, the legislature. Who in the legislature proposed the legislation? That I don't recall.
By no means am I disagreeing with the stipulation that solar is, by all means, it is inherently beneficial and it does offset other fossil fuels,
Yes.
and what have you, that's being generated in the grid stack. But there is case law that says solar is inherently beneficial.
Correct. There's
Yes.
not only case law, but there's specific statute.
Right. And purpose N of the municipal land use law. So when you have planners come and talk about criteria A, which talks about promoting the general welfare, criteria I, a desirable visual environment. Well, the municipal land use law was amended with criteria N, which reads exactly as follows: to promote utilization of renewable energy sources.
Right.
So the municipal land use law was actually amended at section 40:55D-2 to add N, which talks about the renewable energy sources.
And that's in the general standards for, under the municipal land use law, but there were specific sections, which I don't have the citations to right now, but Mr. Aller, I think, agrees with me, that originally what the legislature did was they made it a permitted use in every industrial zone, and then they later went back and added a section that all renewables energy sources, including wind, solar, are inherently beneficial by definition, so that way they'd be treated that way under what it was pre-existing case law.
Thank you very much. Other questions?
I have one quick question. You mentioned, you referenced Mr. Steyer's testimony with respect to the curve in the road providing a buffering. That's only in one direction. If you're coming from the other direction and you look at the pictures that were submitted, the material, the planting material that had been removed is going to be restored to provide buffering when you're coming from, when you're coming from either 22 or Findaren Avenue and heading toward the Hamamatsu building where it's on your right. If you're coming from the other direction, you could argue that there is some visual buffering in the sense that the road is curving away from it. But just so we're clear.
So we're clear, right, and that is why we agreed, as Mr. Erd asked me, it's not just the existing buffering as a condition, you'll agree to install the additional vegetation, which we will.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Other questions? Board professionals?
I have no questions.
Members of the public, questions on Ms. Scafone's testimony? All right, seeing none. You want to wrap up, Mr. Erd?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Rather than belabor a rather simple application that you've heard a lot of testimony on, at this point, I would just reiterate the comments that everyone has made before, the board's questions and the answers there too, the conditions that we've outlined here, and ask for the board to grant this preliminary and final site plan approval, use variance, and other design standard waivers and variances that have been requested.
All right, before we turn it over to our board attorney, I want to make sure any members of the public that would like to speak for or against this application have a time to come forward and speak. All right, seeing none. All right, Mr. Aller, why don't you take us through what's been stipulated and conditions?
Sure. So, Mr. Chairman, as we've just heard concisely, the conditions, as we've gone through this evening, were with respect to if there's an approval, the orientation of the angle would be such that there would be reduced glare, and if there is glare from the lighting, the applicant would work with our planner and engineer to reduce that and to shield it. The existing buffering that's there would be maintained. The additional landscape buffer would be added in accordance with the plan. There'll be no increase in impervious coverage. They will continue to maintain the ADA spaces and the parking spaces on site as existing. They will clean out the basins, and I think Bill also asked for just a letter confirmation that the drainage structures are operating properly. And maintain the facility in good working order.
And I think there's one other thing. I mean, you may have covered it in the glare section, but also shielding lights if the board's engineer planner determines that they need that.
You good? No? Scarlett wants more.
I sort of had, it's halfway. They shall keep the solar panels in good working order, and if that is not the case, they shall return to the board to discuss a decommissioning.
Decommissioning plan.
That's acceptable.
Acceptable?
Yes.
Got it.
Mr. Burr, you okay? All right. Mr. Erd, thank you. We're going to begin deliberations unless you have anything further.
I have nothing else. Thank you.
Why don't we throw it down to Mr. Fresco? Your thoughts on this case, please.
Well, the funny thing for me is that I remember when Ronson occupied that building, and they actually used to be a helipad. I don't know if anybody, I'm aging myself, but there actually was a helipad on the eastern side of this. So hopefully they've, I guess, closed out that approval. I assume somewhere there has to be an approval for a helipad. But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I guess we're going to have to accept these things. I mean, if we were sitting, if we were dealing with these every week, I think it might be an issue, but this is a good spot for it. I am a little concerned about coming down and facing it because, you know, where the picture is, but I guess if you put up the, you know, the cover or whatever, it'll be all right. So I support it. I think it's it's a good cause here.
Yeah, it's a good application, and it really hinges on the Sika balancing test. And in terms of detrimental impacts, it's hard to find any, aside from the visual ones that may hit a driver as he's traversing Foothill Road. But the cure they've proposed for that, which is to maintain and improve the buffer, should handle that. So I don't see on balance any real negative impacts, and am in favor of the application.
Hey, yeah, this is a very good application in terms of solar panels will help quite a bit. I pass through that area almost every other day, take Foothill Road. So that location that I see is perfect because there are not too many houses that are close by, and only for the driving public, it's like a matter of 5 seconds or so you pass it, and that's about it. I'm in favor of this application.
Thank you. Any application that is on Foothill or Frontier Road, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what I consider one of the founders of our town, Lieutenant Bob Vaucher, who was 101 when he passed. And Bob lived on Foothill Road, probably about a quarter mile up to the west from this application. And when Bob passed, and I was with him, you know, he would always joke that I was too tough. I was too tough on applicants. You're too tough on that zoning board. And this was a man that was tough, and I want people to know the reason that road, and Mr. Stiers hit on it, the reason that road, Frontier Road, curves is because Bob drove to Trenton twice a month for 2 years to make Route 287 not go through Hobbstown in Bridgewater. He fought and showed up until someone listened to him, and you know, that man's my hero. And truly, this is not lip service in any way, shape, or form, but Bob was a great man, and I am too tough sometimes. And I promised him when he passed that every application in the whole town, but especially on Foothill, which he loved, I would always remember him, and I would want to honor what he would want to be done there. And Bob always talked about the balance between good zoning and good commerce and good neighbors. And Hamamatsu is clearly a good neighbor and provides good jobs and is an honorable corporation, and we want to make sure that they stay in Bridgewater. This project offsets nearly 93% of their energy usage. Clearly, the applicant has spent a great deal of time to manage any detrimental effects, and we saw that in the Sika balancing. So I'm going to vote in favor. Thank you.
Basically, I consider it a pretty straightforward application. I'm in favor of it. I'm not going to say any more than what everybody else has said.
I think it's a good application. I echo what Chairman Foose has said. I think good corporate citizenship, reducing, you know, energy draw by using the sun. I think it's perfect. I'm in favor of the application.
Thank you. Mr. Kulak.
Yeah, I too am in favor of the application. I think you've answered our questions and agreed to the conditions as outlined, so I would support this.
Mr. Messia.
I think this is a great application. I believe the applicant here has met their burden of proof. I'm fully supportive of the additional conditional approval terms that we've discussed tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Aller, unless you have anything further, I would seek a motion to approve.
I move.
Was Mr. Wiley? Do I have a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Bongiorno. Roger, can we have a roll call vote, please? Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
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 Erd, Hamamatsu, Mr. Stiers, Ms.
Thank you very much.
Axe, thank you very much. Great
It's a
presentation.
pleasure. Thank you very much.
Good night. All right, Scarlett, when's our next
Mr.
meeting?
Aller, be in touch about the draft resolution? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Scarlett, we got that 2 weeks from now?
Yes, please. Next meeting? Okay. Great. And you said 2 cases, September 26, 2 cases on September 26th? All right, great. Then our next meeting, September 26th, this place, 7 PM. And unless anyone has anything further,
I move that
seek
we
a motion.
close.
Do I have a second, please?
Second.
All right, Mr. Bongiorno. Thank you, everyone. I tried.
I told my mother I would be getting my call this time.
Good seeing you. You feel better, man. You look